Steve Gage grew up in a Christian home in Oklahoma and was a good enough athlete to be named to the Claremore and University of Tulsa Halls of Fame and went on to play a few years in the NFL. He relied on the Lord to help him in decision-making along the way that took him from college quarterback to NFL defensive back and a Super Bowl title with Washington. Then his world was rocked when a heart issue nearly took him out of the game of life. Steve Gage's story is one of leaning on God's will through a lot of good times and a lot of not so good, just like most of us. I'd like to start with growing up in Oklahoma. What was the Gage household like, and were you born in Verdigris, or where were you born?
Yeah, actually I was born in Tulsa and lived near the traffic circle there till like second grade or so, and my parents and our family moved out to the community of Verdigris, and so that's where I went to school through elementary. Now back then, Verdigris only went to the 8th grade, so but that's where I grew up. And my parents really never pushed me into athletics or anything. I mean, it was fine if I'd play, fine if I didn't. Mm-hmm. But that's where I grew up. It was my early childhood.
Have any siblings that also maybe played?
No, they didn't. They did other things. So I was kind of the athlete in the family, and okay. Others had their unique interest, and I just went out and tried to play basketball or football in the front yard, you know.
So what was the appeal for sports if your siblings weren't playing and your parents really never pushed it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, when we went to Verdigris, I had a coach named Carl Coleman, who he coached everything. And at Verdigris, he coached football, basketball teams, track, kind of did it all. And he was a very good coach, a very good man, high character guy, Christian man. And he just really, he inspired me. And then I just found a love with competition and just playing and competing. And gosh, sometimes you think about, well, some kids are wired that way, some are not. And I certainly was wired that way, if that's a thing, And I just loved to play and compete, so I'd play any sport possible. And I couldn't play until we got to like the 5th grade. And I didn't play in any competitive stuff before that. And I just played whatever the school offered.
Then you go to Claremore starting in junior high, and obviously they offered football and other sports on that level. Were you playing everything?
Well, I love basketball, always have. And so I played, I went to Verdigris through the 8th grade. Then in the 9th grade, you moved to either went to Catoosa or Claremore. So I went to Claremore, was a zebra. And so in the 9th grade, I played football, basketball, and ran track. And that was what I did all through high school, basically. And so, but, that was kind of as I remember, a new awakening. I was the quarterback at Verdigris, in elementary, and kind of the star player, if you will, and get to Claremore, I'm just a number, so I had to kind of earn it,
Mm-hmm.
So
because obviously the numbers are greater.
Yeah.
I don't know what it would have been back then, but even now, I think Claremore is a 5A school, and you've got Verdigris, I think maybe 2A or 3A.
They're 3A now,
3A,
and then back then, high school athletics went to 5A, I think it was, and Claremore at that time was a 4A.
Okay.
And so. But, yeah, the competition was a lot stiffer, and, where there might have been 2 quarterbacks at Verdigris, there was like 5 or 6 now at Claremore.
Yeah.
So, anyway, yeah.
So you had to kind of find your footing at Claremore, and obviously football became a passion for you to some degree because you stuck with that, and that's what you went on to play in college and ultimately in the NFL as well. So when you were at Claremore, did you continue to play basketball all the way through your senior year?
Yeah, let me share this. I've shared this story a lot with my son, who's a sophomore now. His name's Trevor. He's at Rejoice Christian School in Owasso. But my sophomore year, going as a quarterback, I was 6'1", 145 pounds. Mm-hmm. Very skinny, and I was fifth string quarterback. And I stayed there for a little while, and then some things happened during that year that some injuries happened. They moved some other players to other positions, and I find myself at number 3. Well, the starter gets mad and quits, mm-hmm. and then the next guy gets injured, and I start in a game. And long story short, we were playing Cushing. I remember this. How can you remember this? Remember that game, and we were ranked number 1 in the country. Had a great running back named Kenny Kennard. Mm-hmm. He was recruited by everybody. He went on to play pro baseball right out of high school. Anyway, I threw 2 touchdown passes in the last 5 minutes of the game to win the game. And then from that point on, I was really, my passion was with football. But I almost quit football my sophomore year.
And what happened there?
I got to the end of it, and I loved basketball. And I thought, well, maybe I just should play basketball. And I remember talking to my parents, my dad, and they said, well, they encouraged me to keep playing, and they didn't push me. And so, but they said, you got to start lifting weights, And so I got in the weight room, and I really became obsessed with it my junior year, and drinking protein shakes at night and all this stuff. I put on 30 pounds, between my sophomore and junior, going into my junior year.
And people have to remember, this is early 80s stuff.
Yeah.
This is when the weight room was basically a universal that had a bench press attached to it and a military press and a dip bar. And, I mean, it wasn't the kind of weight room that high schools have now. All right, so let me ask you about that. Go back to that sophomore decision to continue to play football. And tell me about what kind of faith you had at the time. Was the family a church-going family?
Yes, well, it definitely was a priority in the home. And we went to church, whether you wanted to or not, Sundays. Mm-hmm. Back then, you went Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night.
Yep.
And so, but yeah, I grew up that way. And when I got to Claremore, Fellowship Christian Athletes was prevalent then. Perhaps not as dynamic as it is today with a lot of the FCA groups and stuff, but we did have a group, and I became friends with other players and coaches. Some of my coaches were Christian guys that really encouraged me. So I had a lot of really support around me that was Christian based, and my faith was able to develop. And I don't know, I just always, I believe that I met the Lord and became a Christian, was saved at a young age, like when I was about 7.
Okay.
And the Lord, I've had a personal relationship with Him ever since then. At times where I've drifted off, of course, like many people do, but through high school, I was able to really, I see God's, protection around me really through high school, through my relationships with other Christian believers and the encouragement that I had from others. So, yes.
And my wife and I were talking not too long ago about this. She's a few years younger than me. When I was growing up in the late 70s, it seemed like everything was really more about just learning facts about the Bible and a lot less emphasis on your heart and that direct relationship with the Lord. It was just about Bible bowls. People may or may not know that you're a member of the Claremore High School. I don't know if it's a high school, but it's Claremore Hall of Fame, Sports Hall of Fame.
Yeah, Sports Hall of Fame.
And so obviously you did well at Claremore. Yeah. Were you an all-state player by the time you graduated from there?
Yes, in 2 sports, in football and basketball.
And basketball.
Yeah. And so that was a big honor and enjoyed those times and really kind of wanted to go play in the back then you had to pick which go play football all-state game or basketball, and I really thought hard about wanting to play basketball. It was my last time,
Yeah.
But I could have went and played Division II basketball, but I wanted to play football in D1. So anyway, I ended up playing in the all-state game for football. But yeah, I had those 2.
Well, what offers were rolling in for football and basketball for you?
Well, back then it's just I'm learning the new recruiting process with my young son right now, and we're just kind of entering into it. But it's way different than today.
Yep.
And
there's no huddle stuff back then.
Yeah, there's no huddle videos and all this. In fact, somebody asked me the other day, said, "How did you get?" What kind of videos you send? Well, you send film on a reel.
Yep. And you edit it, and you you go find the highlights, and you splice them together. Yeah. So
I had a couple of coaches that did some of that for me, bless their hearts. And in high school, Coach Chris Thurman, who is now he's coached all over. Great defensive mind, defensive back coach. he was real involved with, some of my early training and getting ready for college. And then, so anyway, I narrowed it down. I kind of narrowed it down pretty quickly between OU and TU. And Coach Thurman had some contacts there with Coach Proctor at OU, if you remember him.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to OU's summer camp before my senior year, and they but I love to play quarterback, and they wanted me to play defensive back, and I kept trying to convince them to let me play quarterback.
So did you play defensive back at Claremore and quarterback? Is that how that happened?
Yes.
Okay.
But I mean, truthfully, I played. They didn't start. I didn't play the whole game at free safety or strong safety, and I'd play half of it and play full-time quarterback. So anyway, OU. So I narrowed it down between OU and Tulsa. There was other smaller D1 schools and D2 schools that were throwing offers and all that, but I narrowed it down to them and ended up choosing University of Tulsa. Now. Because I wanted to play quarterback, and Merv Johnson came to my high school and offered me, said, "Oh well, we just see you playing safety, and we got all these real fast guys that play quarterback." I said, "Well, how fast do you think I am?" and I was pretty fast, For I ran back in high school, I ran like a 4.6, and that was pretty solid. But anyway, they offered me to play DB, safety, and John Cooper and Larry Coker. Were both recruiting me hard and said, you're going to be our quarterback, So I signed there. And then I show up at Tulsa, and they've told 5 other guys the same thing.
Yep.
So, but anyway, yeah.
So I'm trying to think early 80s at Oklahoma, because you would have they won that national title in 85, and that would have been Wishbone, Jamel Holloway.
Yes, yeah.
So right before that would have been Troy Aikman. In like 83, 84.
He would have been right after we tried to recruit him at Tulsa. So he would have been a couple years younger than I at that time.
Okay.
And, of course, he didn't give Tulsa a second look really then and went to OU. So you know that story.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yeah, very well. Let's talk about those times that you say that you may have drifted off center. Would that have happened during your time at Tulsa? I mean, it happens to a lot of us. We get to college and we are making our own decisions and we're away from home, even though you're not that far away from home.
Right.
You're not living in the home anymore.
And thankfully, I really truthfully have to say no. That I got one of the things that really got me convinced to go to Tulsa early on is I met some guys through FCA and Fellowship for Christian Athletes. Bill Blankenship was actually the FCA local director guy.
Okay.
And he would come and lead Bible studies in our dorms, and I got to know him. Of course, that was before he's so famous, but him and other guys there. But I got plugged in pretty quick to the FCA group. Now, there's times, of course, where you do stupid stuff. I mean, you're a teenager, early 20s, and you do stupid things. But as part of a lifestyle, that didn't happen. I think probably drifting away may have been the temptation after leaving college, and you're totally on your own. You're seeing the world from the eyes, and you're playing in the NFL or whatever. That can be a temptation there.
And the money, I'm sure.
The money, and all the things, and what you want it to become, and all these things, and then you have expectations that you're supposed to be like. And but what's really kept me grounded through all that is my relationship with God, number one, and the foundation that was laid into me by many people, and I can't take credit for myself. I mean, it was people pouring their lives, discipleships. I went to Eastwood Baptist Church, which is where I eventually met my wife, Lisa. Now, she's an OU Sooner and brainwashed that way, okay? In fact, I met her at Eastwood after my first year playing with the Redskins, and I tell you, I'm trying to impress her. I'm Steve Gage with Washington Redskins, and I think she thought OU was a professional team too, and they kind of were.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the people I've had in my life have been the foundation, and certainly my wife Lisa, when we got married, continued that. Her support and her encouragement in my faith and her living it too, is very important, still is today.
So you were able to go through high school and into college without having some sort of attachment to at least a dating life with someone out of high school into college, or did that happen and it just kind of fell apart in high school or in college?
Oh, it really never stayed together through college. I wasn't big on doing a lot of serious dating. Okay, and but when I met my wife Lisa, or at least I saw her, I knew I wanted to get serious with her. Okay,
Isn't it funny how that happens?
Yeah.
Sometimes?
Now when she was at OU, I'll say this for her, a little plug. She hates me doing this, but when she was at OU, and she's a couple years younger than me, but she was voted most beautiful girl on campus. So right away, she got my attention, and then we actually connected through spiritual ways. She grew up at Eastwood Baptist Church, and I went there in college, and our parents, knew and connected, and so.
You're listening to a conversation with former NFL and college football player Steve Gage, recorded in December of 2021. Let's go back into getting into the NFL.
Okay.
Because I've had a few of these interviews on Suit Up where guys have had to make a decision. And some of it wasn't one position or the other. Some of it was one sport or the other. Charlie Ward, had to make a decision whether or not he wanted to play football or basketball in the NBA, football in the NFL, basketball in the NBA. But for you, it wasn't a sport or the other. It was a different position. Because here we go again with the idea of what you had to make between OU and TU, defensive back or quarterback. You get drafted by the Redskins, but they want you to play DB.
Yeah, so here we go again, right? So, I have to back up to after, or kind of during my senior year at TU, and then got selected to go to the Senior Bowl. And me and one of our teammates, David Alexander, both were selected to go there. And so they told me, they didn't know what to do with me. The director of Senior Bowl was like, we want you to come. Scouts want to see it, because really Senior Bowl is all about a scouting 2 weeks, And so they said, we want you to come. We think we're going to put you guys on the North team. Oklahoma's kind of north or south, Put you on the North team. But they want you to come and play defensive back. What do you think about that? I said, okay. They said, well, think about that. You can. So I get down there. I get down to Birmingham, and they say, well, you can play a little bit at quarterback during the Senior Bowl and go practice with them all week. But you're going to play behind a guy named Jim Harbaugh, okay, and a guy named Chris Miller, I think it was. Or they said you could go start at free safety. So I said, all right, I see the writing on the wall here, God. And so I went over and started at free safety, and I got defensive player of the game for the North, got an interception, made several tackles, and then it seemed like from that point on, that was in January, February timeframe, through the draft in late April, everybody saw me as a defensive back.
Yeah.
And back then, there was no RPO. I tell people today, I was doing RPO at Tulsa before it was ever known what RPO is. That's what the split back veer offense is. And so the decision to make, to be defensive back was kind of made for me. I just had to go along with it and devote myself to it.
Yeah. So how hard was that? Because obviously, as we've talked, you had this heart for quarterback that started all the way back in sixth grade, making the transition from one town to the other to I'm not going to play if I can't play quarterback in high school, and to now you got to make a decision in college. So were you committed to playing defensive back once you got into the NFL?
Absolutely. Yeah, I got committed to doing that. And I always had in the back of my mind, what if, something happened. In fact, when I was at the Redskins, Coach Gibbs, back then the player rosters were like 48. Today it's like 52 or 54. So they really had to be wise with who's activated and who's not. And you had a two-man taxi team, as I remember this. And me and a guy named Mark Rippon. You remember him?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Quarterback.
He's a quarterback. And he went on to win a Super Bowl. But they kind of moved him up and down in his early years, activated, not activated. and they would leave me on there, but if he wasn't activated, I was the third string quarterback. Okay, and Doug Williams and Jay Schrader, and then it would be me if disaster struck. And so Coach Gibbs Coach Gibbs and offensive coordinator there. Anyway, they had a series of plays for me, about 8 or 10 plays. I'd practice occasionally. They were all sprint out passes and RPO stuff.
Yeah.
That if something happened, I would play. But I never got that chance. So.
Now, did you play any special teams while you were with Washington too, or
yes.
Punt return, kick returner?
Yes, I did kick return, punt return, and not every game. There's times where kind of either rotated us, but most of the time I played all the special teams. Yes,
yeah.
and to being the outside guys on punts, run down, try and tackle or get the ball, and all the others. Yeah.
What's the name of that position? Because it's a violent position to play.
What do they call it? I forget.
I do too.
That you got two guys trying to beat the what out of you at the line of scrimmage, and you got to fight two guys all the way down and get between them. So it's
then dead sprint
to the ball.
To the ball.
Yeah, and then don't do something stupid when you get down there.
So let's talk about that time in the NFL. You were with the Redskins for two full seasons. Two full seasons, and one of them was the Super Bowl.
Yeah, the first one. Yeah. So that's just being at the right place, at the right time, and of course I'll give credit to God for that one.
Absolutely.
And timing.
Every good thing comes from him.
That's right. Every good thing comes from him. So and that was a strike year. So that was a interesting navigation for us who were rookies. And so went through that, but once that was over, the team, had a lot of veterans on it that really pulled us together, and we went out and had a great year. We had some losses, but we got into the playoffs, and then the rest is history.
When did the knee problems start?
Yeah, they started after I left the Redskins, and I wish, looking back, you wish you would have done certain things differently at times. And I got down to, I was signed as a free agent with the Miami Dolphins. And this is where I learned of the kind of the bad business side of football, NFL. And so now, I've always been taught don't say things bad about people, and I won't. But you just learn a different angle from the general manager who promised you a bunch of stuff to Don Shula and all this. And I hurt the meniscus in my knee, under my knee pad, and really should have had surgery, and it just wasn't taken care of. And I was a bit naive with it, and I thought, well, I'm just going to play through this pain, and tried to play through it. And it just got worse and worse, and then they cut me, and then you're hurt, and you really should have had surgery, and you should have gotten rehabilitated, but now you don't. And so I kind of had to go do some of that on my own afterwards because I wanted to come back. I wanted to come back to the NFL. And so that's where it happened, and that in the end, that's what really ended my professional career. I did go play another year with the World Football League.
Yeah. Well, you tell us a little bit about that.
Actually, that was a lot of fun. It wasn't quite the same money and all that stuff. But Lisa and I were married during the time, and it was great for us. Because when we traveled, I was with a team, Birmingham, Alabama. Chan Gailey was my coach, head coach. Great guy, great Christian guy, too. I've just been really blessed to been able to be coached by some great men, some Christian men, too. But anyway, he was a great example to us, and we'd go to church with him on Sunday some and during the camp. But anyway, Lisa was the wives. They allowed the wives to travel with us when we went to Europe. So we went to Barcelona, Spain, and played them. We went to Frankfurt, West Germany, played them. And we played in Barcelona. They just built it was the same stadium that the Olympics was in the next year.
Yeah.
Packed. And these people were very loud and excited. They didn't know the game of football very well.
Did they bring vuvuzelas to the game like they would a soccer game?
Yeah.
Do you remember or not? The big long horns?
Yeah.
You can't. Well, listen, you would remember the vuvuzelas, I think.
I don't remember that one.
Okay.
All I remember, they didn't know the game very well, but any big collision, they just cheered. It just loud. Anytime there's a big hit, they were really into it. But, so it was a lot of fun. Lisa and I got to travel through there, and you got to tour, castles and all this stuff in your off time and get to play a little bit of football.
So, so how many years now married when you were in the WFL?
With World Football League, we were married 2 years.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. That was our first 2 years, yeah.
So when did children come into play?
Yeah, Lisa and I were married 10 years before we had kids. So everybody gave up on us. They said, "You guys must not want to have kids," And but we did. In year 2000, our first comes along, Mr. Tristan, and so he was born, and now he's 21. It's unbelievable. And then 5
Good
years.
job having him in the year 2000.
Yeah.
Because the math is easy.
The math is easy. You're right about that. It helps me. So, and Tristan's a great kid. He's an art major at Rogers State University.
Okay.
He loves art and doesn't have a athletic desire at all. He's pretty good athlete, but doesn't play anything. So he's a great artist.
Yeah.
And then Trevor came along 5 years later, and he's an athlete, plays football, basketball, he's ran track, but so 2 boys, and down the road after we got married. Yeah. So
let's talk about the big thing that happened so far in your life, and that would have been about 3 years ago or so. Did you have a heart attack?
Not a heart attack, thank God. That's part of the miracle with it, is I didn't. And,
okay.
And I had, I'd let myself go. I thought I was in decent shape, and had gotten up to like about 260 pounds. And I played football at 205, 210, which is where I'm at today.
Yep.
And so I just ate the wrong stuff and too much of it all the time, and tried to exercise when I could. I was working a lot, traveling in a car, driving across Oklahoma for hours, and just doing all that like so many guys do. And what happened is I found out that I had heart issues. Because I would go out with Tristan, my oldest. We thought, well, we're going to go jogging a little bit and run a little bit. So we did, and our commitment was, I don't care if it's snowing or whatever. We're going to go run now. We didn't do it maybe 3 times a week or so, and it wasn't like for miles and miles. But after a while, I would begin to jog, and after about 2 minutes of jogging, I would feel this pressure in my chest. Mm-hmm. And I would it felt like acid reflux, and I had acid reflux, which I've learned is a big sign of heart issues and heart disease. So I just thought, well, that's just acid reflux, and I take a pill for that. Take a pill,
Yeah.
So I just kind of kept running through it every day, every time we'd go, and it would hurt. And sometimes I'd tell Tristan, "Hey, let's stop," and then I'd still try to keep running through it, that football nature, I guess. Mm-hmm. And then Tristan developed a toenail problem, and he couldn't run and he couldn't stop. So I think it was God saying, you need to stop running and go get your heart looked at. And finally, Lisa said, you need to go in and check it out. So I went into my primary care. They said, we don't think you got a problem, but we're going to rule it out, go do a treadmill test. And that's where they found it. It's on a treadmill test.
And what did they find?
Major blockage, and it was blockage created over time, and so they said we got to go do a heart cath. They went in and did a heart cath, and they thought they were going to give me some stents maybe. Well, I come out of the heart cath because I'm a little tipsy or doozy then, and then come out and they said, well, he pats me on the shoulder to the doctor and says, well, it's too serious. We couldn't do it. We're going to have to do surgery on you. I'm like right now?
Wow.
and said, no, not now. But, so we scheduled it, within a week or two. Mm-hmm. And Kevin and I had 5 bypasses.
Wow.
And the Widowmaker, the interior to lower descending, that they call the Widowmaker, was blocked at the corner. The corner of that and the main artery was 90% blocked, and I had 4 others that they had to bypass, and it just, was a mess. And so I went on why did this happen? I'm so silly. I'd heard about heart disease, and I should have been listening, and I never did. I thought, well, I eat what I want to eat, exercise a little bit.
You were always leaning on that. I'm an athlete or a former athlete,
right.
And so stuff like that can't happen to me.
It's not going to happen to me, and I'll go out and run a little bit. And I did. I lift weights sometimes. Well, that's not enough. And so I learned through my cardiologist, who Lisa and I thank God for him, Dr. Richard Kassiri, here in the St. John's Network. And he told me about why it's happened, and the eating and the cholesterol and what causes the blockage, and all the high fatty foods. And so he's a big promoter of eating whole food, plant-based. Okay. And so that's what I converted to. Like after my first meeting with him before surgery, I converted to that. And for some reason in my mind, I've never struggled with that decision.
Yeah.
A lot of people do. Now I struggle with, early on being disciplined to not eat those foods because you're addicted to them.
Yeah.
And so I went on that after surgery, after coming out of the heart surgery, which is a whole nother stress and worry, and your mind, you think the worst. That you hear about people who don't come out of their surgeries and die, Yep. And so it was very, very stressful. I got a great church, First Baptist Church of Leonard, where I'm a bivocation pastor that prayed for me, was there with me. And of course, Lisa, number one, is there with me and taking care of me, my boys, and our family circle all around me. So prayer and scriptures that people would send me that were just fantastic, and I've documented all those. And I keep them with me. I read them from time to time. I'll give them to other people that are going through these things, going into a major serious surgery.
Is there one in particular, Steve, that really strikes you that's the first one you will relay to people?
Yeah, and I'd like to find the address for it, but there's several, and they talk about that God will heal you and bring you to health, and I really didn't know about all these scriptures. Now, let me read a couple to you.
Sure.
Jeremiah 30:17. I like short verses because I can remember them better. But I will restore you to health and heal your wounds. How about that? That was a promise I had going in that thing. He's going to restore me to health. Psalms 107:20. He sent out his word and he healed them. He rescued them from the grave.
Yeah.
And because you're thinking, man, am I going to end up in the grave? He's going to rescue me. Now this is one I really like, and that came to mind for the new eating lifestyle I had, and is Jeremiah 23:25-26. Worship the Lord your God, and his blessing will be on, watch this, his blessing will be on your food and water, and I will take away sickness from among you. I will give you a full lifespan.
Yeah.
His blessing is going to be on the way I'm going to be eating, and the way I'm going to be living my lifestyle. So it was verses like that really stood out to me, and I still keep them today.
Yeah.
And those are verses that people sent me, and so if you know someone going through a situation that's a serious life-threatening thing, never hesitate sending them scripture.
Yeah.
Because you never know what that's going to do. I remember Bill Blankenship. Bill and I stay in touch. We're not like weekly, guys talking to each other. I'd shared with him a situation before surgery. And of course, he had the cancer surgery that he went through.
Yep.
And he sent me verses, and he sent me a text the morning of my surgery. I didn't get it because I was on the operating table, but Lisa got it. And, just encouraging things like that coming from people right out of Scripture.
I know I had that when I was going through my COVID scare a few months ago. Same thing. And, of course, my thing was, and I certainly encourage anybody to do it, in this time that we live in, and nothing wrong with the text, but boy, a handwritten note, a card.
That's true.
Because we know the effort it takes to do a handwritten note or card and to buy the stamp and to put it in the mail and to get that to somebody takes so much more time and effort, and it means more. And I certainly have become a big proponent of sending cards and letters, and I've tried to do that since I recovered from COVID, and now am alive and am doing well.
That's good.
But I appreciate that thought though, because that really is important.
Yeah. So. Now you stop me, like I said, if I go on too long here. But
no, I want you to. I do want you to talk more about that, because I know that that's something that you really believe in, because you saw it happen in your life in that whole mindset change of how to take care of yourself. Right, and the stats are that 70 to 75% of all Americans are going to get some form of heart disease. And we hear those statements, they kind of go in one ear and out the other, but that's 3/4 of us. That's 7 out of 10 of us. Yeah. And you're going to end up with something. So, I was stupid in the way I was eating. I wasn't drinking alcohol, wasn't doing drugs, but I was eating all the wrong stuff. Right. That can really pollute your system, inflame your coronary artery system, cause cancers, cause heart disease, the whole thing. Not maintaining that temple that God resides in when he's with you. Yes, that temple of God, which I've got a scripture for that. And of course, we all know that. But it's God heals in many different ways. Surgery's one of them. Sometimes he reaches out and touches somebody and heals them. We've seen that happen. Mm-hmm. And then he also heals through what he's already created. And that's plants and vegetables that he's made for us people. Right. And whole foods that have all the nutritions in it that we need to help our bodies perform the way God designed it. Mm-hmm. And man comes along, puts all this stuff in it, and it causes us problems. Yep. Well, and I was it looked like I was, maybe I was trying to look up the scripture, and you may be able to help me with it, because it was Daniel, as far as healthy eating, because this isn't something new, because you had those guys who they were feeding the king's food, and then wasn't it Daniel? Yes, it is. Daniel who said, chapter 1 verses 8 and 9, I think. Yeah, he said, let me eat this other food, and the other food was basically stuff straight out of the ground, that God had made, and then let's see who looks the healthiest at the end of whatever the period was. Mm-hmm. And so it's not like this is something new. I mean, that's a story from thousands of years ago about eating right. Right. And then another scripture that tells us to do this in 1 Corinthians 6:19-20 says, don't you realize that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, who lives in you and was given to you by God? You do not belong to yourself, for you have been bought with a high price, so you must honor God with your body. Yeah. And then there's others that are going to point us to taking care of ourselves and all of that. So eating, you got to eat right, and you got to eat healthy to lose weight and keep it off, and you need to exercise a little bit. Now let me ask you this, Steve, before we go. Do you have is there a website that you would point people to? Do you deal with or talk with people on social media? Do you have a Facebook or Twitter that you would want to put out there? That's where I'm lacking right now, and I need to get all that. I really do. Yeah. We kind of stalled. COVID kind of slowed Dr. Kassiri and I down a little bit from the big meetings and everything. So, but that's where I'm headed at some point or another, and I don't have that today. But maybe through your station, if somebody wants to get a hold of me, I'd love to help people. For now, listeners, just reach out to me, and you'll find my email address at suitup611.com, or you just call the Sports Animal, and they can point you in my direction. Thank you. My thanks to Steve for agreeing to be on this podcast. You can hear more stories like Steve's at suitup611.com.